Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to DudeIWatchThat.com's continuing coverage of the Sundance Film Festival 2021. And we are with Debbie Lum, the director of Try Harder, which is playing in the US documentary competition. How are you, Debbie?
I'm good, thanks. How are you,
Pretty
Daniel?
good, thank you. So to start, just kind of the boring, essential question that you've probably answered like many times at this point, but what was the kind of initial spark of this project? What was the idea of it that made you want to do it? Was it the school itself or the concept of college admissions and the problems that come with it?
Yeah, I started out exploring college admissions. I'm not from San Francisco, and even though I knew about Lowell because it's a famous school, I didn't know that much about it. And I'm a parent, and I've got kids they're not anywhere near college, but all the parents around me were completely obsessed with getting their kids into college, even though our kids are like in kindergarten. Um, and so that's kind of when I started looking at it, I was thinking about it more from the parents' perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to approach it. Yeah, that is interesting. Is Lowell like a big sensation outside of California? Do people know about it outside of?
Well, not. I think it's not as famous as, say, a school like Stuyvesant High in New York City, which is a very similar type of magnet public school that's very high achieving and very famous for having too many Asians in it. Lowell High School is really, if you live in California, you've heard of Lowell because there's been so many famous alumni, Peace Nobel winners and politicians and famous actors. I mean, Carol Channing went
Oh
to
wow,
Lowell from way
so
back.
interesting. That's cool. And kind of, I wanted to know how it was like getting permits to make the film entirely inside of the school. You don't, there are a few moments where you're in cars and like outside the grounds and whatnot, but what was that like, especially considering I imagine it's difficult.
Yeah, it was interesting. We got so much support from Lowell High School and from the faculty and administration. And I have to really thank the school principal at the time, Andrew Ishibashi, who really understood what we were trying to do. And I think maybe Lowell High School had never been made, no one had ever made a feature documentary about the high school. And, you know, um, it seemed crazy to me that that hadn't happened before. So it was, I think what happened was the students were really supportive. The teachers were really supportive, and it just became a kind of natural extension that the school would be supportive.
That's cool. Yeah, it definitely comes through in the film. There's never like really any moments where it's like voyeuristic or uncomfortable. It's always like it seems like everybody's really happy to be on camera and part of it. So that's cool. Um, and how did you initially stumble upon your subjects? I imagine uh, that was tough considering there's a lot of probably high achieving people that go to that school.
It was hard to choose because they're all pretty amazing kids. And after a certain point, we'd be like, no, you can't continue filming that person because you've got too many students that you could follow. But, you know, Alvin, who's one of our main characters, we met him the first day. The teachers recommended him, and we could see exactly why. He's sort of inimitable. Other kids, we just went through a process of interviewing hundreds of students, and sort of, yeah. I mean, I honestly, it's hard to say because we had so much fun there, and I hate to I've got 3 kids, so playing favorites isn't really is you don't wanna do that as an adult, but, yeah, in terms of, um, we we basically had to find students who are all applying for the certain small, narrow bandwidth of schools as well, and not everyone at Lowell does that. Like, for example, we filmed a student who she's really interesting. She at the time was getting her citizenship to for the United States. She's from China, and you would never know that at all. She just seemed like a totally typical American kid. Um, but you know, her story didn't end up in the film. But there's so many like that. You know.
Oh, cool. So in that regard, was it not like a thing where you went in and said, okay, this movie is going to be about these five people, no one else? Or is it kind of just like you're following everybody around, picking and choosing out of the footage, mix of both?
We did do a little bit of both. Yeah, we did sort of hedge our bets, which made it very challenging in the editing room with 300 over 300 hours of footage.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, we were there for almost 2 years, and because the year before we started filming, in earnest, we were casting and interviewing people. Um, and um, Lowell High School was also a character in addition to the students. It's such an unusual high school, so we sort of knew that we should kind of make sure that is clear in the story. Um, we filmed all kinds of things that didn't get into the film. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, I'm also wondering about, I kind of touched upon this earlier and you did as well, but did you have any difficulty getting the kind of really intimate storytelling that you get, especially, it gets pretty vulnerable at points. Not to spoil the film for in case people check out the second screening or whatever. I don't know when this is going to be posted, but um, yeah, did you have any trouble trying to get people to open up at the beginning? Because again, these are a lot of the times the kids are in pretty vulnerable positions talking about um, their education, and I guess especially because of the competitive nature of it at that school in particular.
Yeah, the kids in our story are amazing, and we got to know them, and they really got comfortable and used to us being there and just sort of always being there. We joked that we relived high school with them, and it was really exhausting. I don't know how they did it. Um, and so I think by the time, I mean, it was like going through a war with them to get through their college admissions journey. I think by the time we got there, it was sort of a natural progression
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah.
yeah,
And if that makes sense.
it does, yeah, and it is interesting. I know, especially because I didn't finish high school too long ago. I know it's people get very tense at that time. Um, not
Yeah. I mean,
not necessarily to this degree.
the hardest thing was actually sometimes scheduling them in the beginning because it was like they had more important things to do than to talk to a documentary film crew. They were
Yeah,
like, I've got stuff I need to do. Can we be done now? And my parents are texting me and telling me like, go do your homework or go talk to this advisor.
yeah. So,
So
speaking of which, just like a side note, I don't even know if I'll include this part in the interview. I kind of just want to ask, is this class of 2019 or 18?
no, it was actually it took a really long time to make this film. They graduated 4 years ago, and
Oh,
so
nice.
a lot of them are graduating. A lot of them are about to graduate from college. Some of them took a little longer, and some were a little younger. But yeah, it's kind of cool because I think as we finish the film, the students can come along with us
Yeah,
and share their college experience now.
that's cool. Oh, will they be doing so in the Q&As you guys have planned?
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
they're going to
awesome.
be at the Q&A, and we hope they could be there for lots more too.
That's really cool. Kind of will have the time capsule effect. Um, I'm also wondering what it's like um, getting not only in terms of emotional vulnerability, but also like very, very close access. Like there are moments. One of the earliest scenes in the film, you're in, or I don't know if it's you or you have multiple camera operators, but you're in one of the characters' cars as, or the subject's cars as they're driving to school. What was it like getting that access on that intimate of a level? Um, Not only in the school setting, but also in their personal lives.
Yeah, you're talking about Rachel and her
Yeah,
mom. would drive her to school every morning. And the interesting thing about that, Rachel is biracial, African American, and white. And at Lowell, she's like less than 2% of her class were African American. So she's really um, a minority in her school. And every morning, her mother and her would get up like an hour before school just so they could drive around. They wouldn't like not take a direct path, just spend time with each other before they went to school and to work. And it was like the sweetest thing that we captured in filming that. And it, I mean, Rachel's just a naturally really open, emotionally present young adult, which is, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer to select her to be a subject of a documentary because she's just so genuine naturally. And I think that that's one thing that I definitely tend to do in documentary filmmaking is, you can't force people to
Yeah.
be in a documentary. You really have to go with people who naturally feel comfortable in front of a camera. And that's most of the kids. I mean, those are the kids that we followed. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
But I do want to actually shout out to my amazing the people who helped me make the film.
uh,
So our producer cinematographer Lou Nakasako, who like you didn't graduate from high school that long ago. So we kind of joke that, or he likes to joke that he went undercover, like in and he did kind of look like almost the same age as the kids. And then our field producer Lauren Kawana, who's just like the most empathetic person. Also, I mean, I think it made it probably easy for a lot of the students.
yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, when you have a lot of people involved in something like this, especially with the scale of the events you're covering, and there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of footage that comes out of something like this. Um, how does it work in terms of, being on set with the crew and whatnot? Is it like you were there all of that school year? You had multiple camera operators bouncing between them?
We were actually a really tiny crew.
Oh,
We also, um, we had another cinematographer besides Lou, Kathy Huang, who was there, but she would fly up from Los Angeles, and then every now and then we'd have some other people coming in at really opportune moments, like when we had really big shoots, like the prom or graduation, where you really needed multiple cameras. But most of the time, we were a really really tiny crew, just running around chasing a lot of kids and being very flexible that way because you couldn't really plan for it. You just had to show up and just hope that something would happen and that they would, it would all work out. But will say we were definitely aided by all the physics teachers at Lowell who let us take over their tiny cramped physics office and use it as our staging for all of our gear for like 2 years. It was really nice of them. Because it was like a limited public school with very few resources, and
yeah,
yeah, they were very generous.
yeah, I can imagine. That's cool to hear. And this is the type of subject that you can't really anticipate, at least, but at the same time, um, some of the, I guess, peak dramatic moments of the film do do hit really hard, and it kind of feels like a planned out narrative at points. Did you have a rough outline of not necessarily the moments you wanted to capture, but at least the concepts and themes you wanted to capture? And did you kind of fit that at all into your planning ahead in making the film?
I'd like to say we planned it all out perfectly, but
Yeah.
no, we didn't. I mean, you know, um, we filmed a lot of that sort of narrative construction happened in the editing room.
Hmm.
But the college admissions process, and it's a school year, naturally has seasons and naturally has, you know, different stages. But what we learned when we were there was that it's just relentless. Like it wasn't like it would just be one obstacle and the next 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 and the next. It was like a really almost neurotic way of something unfolding, because it's like they'd have deadline after deadline after deadline, and even that was sort of difficult to explain in the editing room, because you have like um, they apply, they get rejected, but then they have to apply again, and then they don't get rejected, they get waitlisted, and then they get, I mean, it's just like it just was endless.
Yeah. And in terms of the edit, how creatively involved are you? Because I assume it's um, difficult to go through that much without necessarily being on the shoot the whole time.
Yeah, I'm a pretty hands-on person in post, but I had amazing editors helping me. I mean, creating the film, creating the story. Andrew Gersh, Amy Ferreras, Victoria Chalk, and Lou Nakasako, our cinematographer, also did editing. And so it's like it was a team effort. But I used to be an editor, so that's how I started.
Oh, cool.
I started in the editing room, so I don't know, it's like a good and a bad thing, I
Yeah.
think, for an editor to work with someone
Yeah.
who's
Does
like that.
does having that editor mindset at all contribute to you coming up with the idea of this film? Just because it is really an editor's film, if you want to put it that way, you can put it that way because it relies really heavily on the edit.
Yeah, I mean, like so much can happen in an edit. That's the thing about making documentaries. It's the editor that has the most power.
Okay.
They are the writers of the film, and it's so fascinating, and it's such a difficult job because they're writing with somebody else's words.
Yeah.
It's like and so yeah, the edit, you know, we at different times people told us um, of work to make that succeed.
Yeah. Totally. Um, those are technically all the questions I have, but I do want to tag on one more thing. I noticed you have the PBS Independent Lens logo at the beginning. Um, Unfortunately, all the screenings for this are sold out. So when this goes up, if people are sold on it, they can't necessarily do anything about it. But do you know at all what your plan is for the film? Do you know if you're going to be on PBS within the next few months or a few more festivals first and then that?
Um, well, we're kind of excited because we actually have a year-long window
Oh, cool.
to release the film before it goes onto public television in the United States. So it really depends on what happens. If audiences love it, which we're hoping they will, what kind of a release it will have. I mean, of course, we would love it to go theatrical or to have as many people see it as possible.
Sure.
But yeah, I can't tell you what it would be yet.
Yeah. Okay, so they're not necessarily your distributor. You're still hoping to get a theatrical distributor before.
We're
All
still
right.
looking for a distributor.
Yeah. Um, yeah, in that case, for the folks watching, you will see this in the next year, so that's something. Um, and just to wrap up, when people do get a chance to check this out, is there anything in particular you hope they take away from it?
You know, this is a story that we made for the students, and the parents come along for the ride. And I think when I went into it, I didn't realize it was going to be such a brutal journey that they would go on. And I hope that the film can be like a mirror that holds up a reflection um, about what they went through and it's really sort of trying to get to the other side of this very difficult journey.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I can say from somebody who graduated high school just over 2 years ago that it does really reflect my experience in Canada, I guess. Yeah, that the whole that whole idea is still as prevalent, and I think it does articulate the stress of that in a way that I can't myself. So in that regard, I think this will have quite a big impact, and I appreciate you making it and joining me to speak about it today.
That's so nice about you. Now I want to find out all about high school in Toronto. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So